Hilchos Korban Pesach, Perek Shlishi, the laws of the Passover sacrifice, chapter 3. Today is a day before Yom Kippur. It's a busy day, it's a packed day, but there's always time for Rambam. Rambam is every day. Doesn't matter if it's the busiest day of the year, the emptiest day of the year, the holiest day of the year, the joyous day of the year. We're doing Rambam every day. And we're learning about the Korban Pesach, the Passover sacrifice. Just before Yom Kippur, I tried to find the connection to Yom Kippur. I couldn't. It's just halacha. We're just learning Hashem's Torah about the Korban Pesach, specifically about agency on the Korban Pesach. That's going to be today's discussion. Shlichus. If you send an agent and he mixes up what you told him or he forgets what you told him. We'll also talk about if people lost their sacrifice. Oh, maybe that's the connection. This morning we did kaparas with the chickens. And sometimes you buy a chicken and the chicken runs away. You lose the chicken. My sister told me she was in LA, walking down the street and she hears chicken sounds and there's the guy chasing his kaparas down the street. So we're going to have a case where they lost the Korban Pesach. The sheep that they put aside, the lamb or the goat, ran away. Maybe that's the connection there. What happens if you lose the Korban Pesach? What happens if you mix up? When you put aside a sacrifice, everybody, it goes for you specifically. What if my group has a sheep, your group has a sheep, and the sheep get mixed up? The sheep only belongs to a certain group. So what do you do? So that's going to be the halachas that we're going to discuss today. So the Rambam begins with the following scenario. Halacha Aleph, ha'omer la'avdei. A person tells his servant, a Jewish servant, Tzei u'shchait alai es ha-Pesach. I have a lot to do at home. It's Pesach tonight. There's a Seder to prepare for. There's a lot going on. You go to the Beis HaMikdash for me and slaughter a Passover sacrifice for me. Even if every year this particular master slaughters a lamb for the Korban Pesach, and this servant goes and buys a goat instead, because the Korban Pesach could be either a sheep or a goat. So the owner, the master, every year does a lamb. But he told the servant to go. He doesn't know. He goes to the market, he buys a goat. Or the habit of the master was to slaughter a goat. Instead, the servant goes and slaughters a lamb. The master is allowed to eat from the Passover sacrifice. He never explicitly stipulated and said, hey, I want you to slaughter me this type of animal.
And if he did?
If he did, that's a whole other halacha. The next halacha, we're going to see what happens if he says sheep or goat. Halach v'shachat gedi vitle. What if the servant says, you know what, I don't want to get my master upset. I don't know what he wants. I don't know if he wants a sheep, a lamb, or a kid goat. So I'm going to do both. He slaughters both. Einoi oichel mishnehem. Says the Rambam, the master cannot eat from any of them. From either of them. They have to be burnt. She'ein nimnin al shnei psachim. Because you cannot register yourself to two Passover sacrifices. What did the servant just do? He attached his master to both. He's like, goat or the lamb, just in case, we'll do both. You can't do both, with one exception. If it was a king or a queen, and they told their servant to slaughter for them, and they didn't specify whether a kid or a lamb, and the servant slaughtered both, just in case. And here we allow the king or the queen to eat from the first one, whichever was slaughtered first, mishum shloi malchus, to keep the peace with the government. You wouldn't want to tell the king, hey, none of your sacrifices are kosher, then I'll have them killed. Actually, there's a story in the Talmud about that.
Be Jewish.
Yeah, Jewish king.
So,
not all Jewish kings were so holy. I'm saying if you told them that both disqualified, so what are you talking about? I sent my servant. The Talmud tells a story that it happened once. That's how we know the halacha, because they went to the rabbis to ask, and they said that even though usually it's disqualified, but over here we want to keep it kosher. Halacha beis. Now we go back to the cases. What if the master did specify what he wants? Ha'omer lishluchai. A person tells his agent, "Tzei u'shchait alai es ha-Pesach." Go out, slaughter for me a Passover sacrifice. V'kov aloi gedi oitle. And he now establishes. He said either a kid goat or a lamb. V'shachach ma'omar le'rabbi. And the servant goes to the temple and he forgets what his master said. So now what do you do? So the Rambam says he should slaughter both. but he shouldn't slaughter both for his master. He should do the following. V'omer, he should say, Im gedi amar li, if my master said kid goat, gedi shaloi v'tle shali. So the kid goat is going to be his, and the lamb is going to be mine. As we saw yesterday, a Jewish servant can slaughter his own Passover sacrifice. So you'll do your own. V'im tle amar li, tle shaloi ugdi shali. And if he told me lamb, so lamb will be his, and kid goat will be mine.
And if he did it the other way around, he just switches over.
Exactly. Yeah. So the stipulation covers all the bases, and that's fine. This is before cell phones, before WhatsApp, before email. Exactly. Of course, today.
They can't talk to him.
Exactly.
Today that would never take
Today this could never happen. But now you have another issue. What happens if shachach hasheleach ma amar lo? What if the sender forgot what he said? The servant forgot, so he slaughters both, just in case. Comes back, says, I forgot what you said, so we have both options. And the guy says, you know what? I also forgot what I said. Shneyem yetu lebeis hasreifa. So now, because the condition cannot be fulfilled, both of them have to be burnt. And that's it.
And they can go to find another, they have to go get another one.
If there's time. If not, you do Pesach Sheni. V'im shachach hasheleach kedem she'yizarei kadam. If they work it out, and they find out that the sender forgot what he had established before the blood was sprinkled, chayavin lasis Pesach Sheni. They're obligated to make the second Pesach a month later. Shachach achar shenizra kadam. If he forgot only after the blood was sprinkled, which means that retroactively, while the blood was sprinkled, he knew which one was his. Pater milasis Pesach Sheni. Fascinating. He's exempt from having a second Pesach. So here you have a scenario where at his Seder, he won't have a Passover sacrifice, and he will not have to make up for it. Because at time of sprinkling of the blood, it was clear what was his. The same thing applies if he tells his servant, go slaughter for me a Korban Pesach. And he established for him, and the servant forgot what the master said. Same thing. In other words, the first case was a regular agent, not a servant. Here it's a servant also. But that's provided if the shepherd who owns the master's animals hands him a goat and a lamb, and he tells him, he says, you slaughter them both so that you can slaughter the way your master told you. And one of them belongs to you with the condition that it won't belong to your master at all, because otherwise the servant doesn't have a hand of his own. If the shepherd did that, then it's possible for the servant to make the condition, as we explained. Otherwise, he's an extension of his master, and if he forgets, there's no conditions to be made. You can't say, this is going to be mine, this is going to be his. Whatever is yours is his anyways. Halacha Gimel, B'nei Chabura, people in a group. People in a group, they're making a Seder, everyone's preparing the stuff. Sha'amru le'echad, they tell one person, say, Ushchait lano es ha-Pesach. They say, you know what, you're the guy. You go slaughter a Korban Pesach for us. V'amar hu lahem v'atem shachtu alai. But then he told them, you know what, I don't know what's going to happen. You slaughter for me also. I'll have you in mind, you have me in mind, and let's see what happens. V'shachatu heim v'shachatu. And he and them both slaughtered a Korban Pesach. Kulam oichlim mizeh shenishchat rishon v'ha'achrin yetzel lebeis hasreifa. They all have to eat from the one that was slaughtered first, and the other one goes to be burnt. Because they both imposed the agency on each other. You do it for us, we'll do it for you. So whoever's first, everybody eats from. Halacha Dalid, now we have a couple of interesting scenarios. Chabura sha'avad pischa. You have a group. They had a Passover sacrifice. Very important to consider the beginning of the scenario. They already had a lamb or a goat set aside, and it got lost. The amru le'echad. So they tell one guy, Tzei uvakesh ushchet aleinu. We have an idea where it went down the street over there in Jerusalem's old city. We think we know where it's hanging out. Go find it and slaughter it for us. Halach umatza pesach she'avad ushchate. He goes, he searches, and he finds the Korban Pesach that was lost. True to the instruction, he goes to the temple, slaughters it. Meanwhile, it was getting late. The guys in the group said, he's not going to find it. We should go do another one. Veheim lakchu pesach acher ushchatuhu. They took another Passover sacrifice and slaughtered it. And now they show up at the Seder, and there's 2 lambs. Which is the right one to eat from? So the Rambam says 3 scenarios. And you see it on the chart on the left side. Depends whose sacrifice was slaughtered first. Im shaloi nishchat rishain. If his his meaning it's the original group's one, but it's the one that he found, the one that the agent found. If he slaughtered his one first, hu eichel mishalai, so he can certainly eat from that one which he slaughtered for himself. Veheim eichelim imai, and they should join him because it's their original sacrifice. That's why I have two checks there. The agent can for sure eat from it, and even in the parentheses is the rest of the group also eats with him. V'hasheni yisarif, and the one that the group brought goes to the fire. It has to be burnt because it was a useless sacrifice. The other one, which was their original one, was already slaughtered first. But v'im shalahem nishchat rishain, if it turns out that the group's one was slaughtered first, the new one which they put aside was slaughtered first. So now, heim oichlin mishalahem, they have to eat from their Passover sacrifice. The group has to eat from their one because it's the one they slaughtered for themselves and they slaughtered it first. V'hu oichel mishalai, the agent cannot join the group because they never had him in mind. He has his own Passover sacrifice that he did. He has to eat from his own one. So they basically have to split. He eats himself, they eat themselves.
No love lost on that.
Exactly. If you don't know which one was slaughtered first, no one was checking the time, or it turns out that they were both exactly at the same time, and how could that be? Well, we saw the other day, I showed you this picture a few times already, that it was a whole production line, right? In the temple, there was no order of Kohanim slaughtering. Everybody stood in a line, and everybody slaughtered their Passover sacrifice together. So it's very, very possible that the two people slaughtered their sacrifice at once. So what do you do then if you don't know? Or it was slaughtered at once. So now, says the Rambam, hu eichel mishaloi, the agent can for sure eat from his. Because in either way, he gets to eat from his own. Either he was first, slaughtered it for the group, and himself, or just for himself. Vehein einam eichlim imai, but they cannot eat with him. Because if theirs was slaughtered first, then theirs is the kosher one, and they're not kosher to be with the individual guy. Therefore, their animal goes to the fire. But on account of the doubt, they're exempt from making second Passover sacrifice because maybe theirs was slaughtered first. It should have been eaten. We're just burning it out of the doubt. So we can't hold them accountable to make a Pesach Sheni.
So they won't have Korban Pesach at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a very interesting scenario. You won't have a sacrifice at the Seder because
No, can you join another group?
if there's still time.
If you have time.
If you have time, you can join. Yeah.
For the mitzvah.
Yeah,
You can.
absolutely. Halacha hey. So that was all the first column, where they told the agent, find it for us. But the agent never answered anything. Amar lahem zeshash lechu levakish pesach she'avad l'shachatay. What if the guy who they sent him to search out the lost Passover sacrifice and slaughter it, what if he told them, he clearly said, im echarti shachatu atem alai. If I'm late, I need you to have me in mind. I'm going to go try to find it, but I'm telling you now explicitly, if I'm late, go take another sacrifice, slaughter it, and have me in mind. So now there's already more interplay happening over here. And therefore, the law basically goes almost exactly the opposite. What happened? He goes, he finds it, he slaughters it, but they thought he was late. And they go, and they also slaughter a separate Korban Pesach. So, im shalahem nishchat rishain, go to the second column first. If theirs was slaughtered first, heim oichlin mishalahem, so they can certainly eat from theirs. V'hu oichel imah, and he can eat with them in this case. Why? Because he asked them. He said, clearly slaughter it for me. So they had him in mind. The hasheni yisaref, the second one which he slaughtered, is to be burnt. V'im shalai nishchat rishain, if his was slaughtered first, hu oichel mishalai, he can eat from his. But because they took their own, v'heim oichlim mishalahem, they have their own. If you don't know who was slaughtered first or both together, they can eat from theirs for sure, because either way they're good. He also appointed them, but once they did it, they removed themselves from him. So they're for sure good. But he can't eat with them, because maybe they didn't have him in mind, or he had himself in mind because he slaughtered his own sacrifice. And therefore his goes to the fire, and he's exempt from making a second Passover sacrifice. Halacha vav. Let's say it wasn't exactly, they weren't all part of the same group. It was two elements here. Okay, let's use this slide over here exactly. Avad lahem pischam, ve'avad loy pischai. There was a group who lost their sacrifice, and there was this individual guy who lost his sacrifice. The Amar Lahem, he asks them, Tsu'u vakshu v'shachatu alai. Please try to find my sacrifice and slaughter it for me. I want to have it. I want to be part of this. They said to him, you know what? We don't know if we're going to find ours. Go find yours and slaughter for us. Very successful day. He goes and finds his Passover sacrifice. They go find theirs. If they all eat from the first one, because they all asked to be joined on the other one, second one is burnt. If you don't know which one was first, or they slaughter together, they both get burnt, and they are exempt from making a second Passover sacrifice. Again, we can't hold you accountable out of doubt. What if the same scenario, each one went to search for the animal, but nobody said anything? Even if everyone had in mind, I really want you to do it for me, I just didn't say it, or there was some winks or hints, or things that the mind could approximate, that everyone that should find it should slaughter for his friend. Even, in other words, even if from the conversation it's clear that that's what we had in mind, but nobody actually said it, since they didn't explicitly say anything to each other, they're not responsible for each other. And nothing could happen. Even if they find it, they don't join, and that's it. Whoever found it works for himself, and that's it. Big problem. And you can imagine how this could happen. There's two groups of people traveling to Jerusalem. Each one has their little lamb for the Korban Pesach. And then, you know how it is in the temple, it gets busy, there's lots of traffic. The two sheep get mixed up. Before they slaughter them, you don't know which one is which. And the problem with that is, again, the lamb needs to belong to the group that registered to it. You can't just take a random lamb. So how do we solve this problem? It says the Rambam goes like this, very interesting solution. Chabura zu leikhin keves echad min hataruves, v'hashniya leikhin asheni. One group takes one sheep, just a random sheep, choose a sheep, a lamb, and the second group takes the other lamb. Ve'echad mibnei chabura zu ba'etzel elu. One of the people in this group crosses to the other group. Ve'echad mibnei shniya ba'etzel harishayna, and one of the second group comes to the first. So we're using the colors here, blue and orange. Watch what happens. Next slide. Boom. Each side took a sheep. One blue went to the orange, one orange went to the blue. So now every group is now made up of members from both groups. And they have to recite the following.
But they registered.
So now there's a condition. Hold on. Yes. And now they recite a very specific formulation. Each group tells the individual that came to them, they tell them the following. If the sheep that we grabbed happens to be our original Korban Pesach, then wonderful. Welcome to our group. Let your hands be withdrawn from your Korban Pesach and come join our group. But maybe it's your Pesach. Maybe it's from your group. In that case, we want to welcome ourselves to your group. We're pulling our hands from our Passover sacrifice and coming onto yours. And now you solved it. And the other group says the same thing. And now, either way, the sheep is back with its registered customers. The only thing is that the friends lose out, right? If you were with your friends, now one guy has to leave the group, but that's no big deal. You've solved the issue. The point is, because you can. Up until the slaughtering, you can keep on deregister, re-register. There's no problem, as we saw yesterday. The chein, and so too, by the way, says the Rambam. Not only if it was two groups, chamesh chavura shel chamisha bnei adam, or eser chavura shel asara asara. Let's say you have 5 groups of 5 people each, or 10 groups of 10 people each, and they all got mixed up. So you play musical chairs. One person from each group joins the other groups. And they make the same condition. This time you have to do it 5 times or 10 times. If it's ours, we're joining yours. If it's yours, you're joining us. If it's yours, you're joining us. Everyone joins each other, and then you slaughter it, and that's all beautiful. 2 individuals, no groups. Okay, just Reuven and Shimon. They each had a Korban Pesach, and the sheep got mixed up. Now how do you solve it? Now there's nobody else. You can't just pull a random sheep and say, just in case me, just in case you. You're 2 separate people. So here, you find the Jew who comes late. Right? It's always that Jew who forgot to register with the Korban Pesach. So what happens is, Pesach echad min hataruvis, v'zeh le'echad. Each guy should just take one of the sheep, and then v'zeh memane al pischei echad min hashuk, v'ha'acher memane imay echad min hashuk. Just choose another Jew from the market to join your group. And he's like the blank slate. And so you can tell the blank slate, you become the group.
He can be like the shliach?
No, he becomes part of your group.
Sorry, what's the original?
Again, two individuals, each had a Korban Pesach. They got mixed up. They need to have somebody else. So they each grab a sheep, pull in another guy from the market, so they can become two groups. Still not enough yet. Then then you switch. Basically, once you have a group, now you can do the switch.
It can't be a single person.
Exactly.
You have to have at least two.
The guy have at least two. So once you have at least two, now you switch one and one. And each one makes a condition with the other guy who came from the other group. And he says, if this is mine original Korban Pesach, so then pull your hands from yours, come to mine. If it's yours, so I'm pulling my hand from mine and coming onto you. Nobody loses anything, no extra sheep have to be bought, and everybody's good. See, the last cases of mix-ups, they all happen before the slaughtering. What happens if you have 5 people, or 5 groups, they all had a Korban Pesach, it was slaughtered, offered properly, but the hides got mixed up. Then they're inspecting the hides, and they find a wart on one of the hides, which is a blemish. So now one of them is disqualified, but you don't know which one it is. Kulam yetzel lebeis hasreifa. They all have to be burnt. V'im nisarvu kaidem zrikas damam.
Why
Huh?
kulam? It's only one.
Because you don't know which one it is. You cannot eat the Korban Pesach if it had a moon. So they all have to be burnt. V'im nisarvu kaidem zrikas damam. If the mix-up happened before the sprinkling of the blood, chayavim bepesach sheni. The whole thing is disqualified. They're obligated in a second Korban Pesach next month. Nisarvu achar zrika. If it mixed up after the sprinkling, turin milases pesach sheni. They're exempt from bringing a pesach sheni. Why? Interesting reason why. Because really, if you think about it, only one of them was really disqualified. She'im hikrivu pesach sheni. If they're going to go and they're going to offer the second Pesach, nimtza zeh shekarav barishin korban kosher maybe chulin la'azara. The person who brought a kosher sacrifice the first time round is actually bringing a mundane animal, an unholy animal, into the temple courtyard, which is huge prohibition. Even if you're going to say, hey, you know what? Let's not do individuals. Let's all sign up to one Pesach Sheni together. But again, 1 or 4 of those people didn't have to bring this Pesach Sheni. So you're slaughtering it for someone who's not obligated. That's like slaughtering it for a person who's not registered, which is a problem. And even if they make a stipulation, and they say, just in case it's not a Passover sacrifice, let it be a peace offering, which usually they have the same status, wouldn't work here. Because Dam HaPesach b'shvicha, the Dam HaShlamim b'zrika. As we saw yesterday, the Korban Pesach is not splashed on the altar, the blood, it's poured. It's a different way. Peace offering is splashed. We learned the law that if an animal's blood is supposed to be applied by splashing, you shouldn't just pour it to begin with. Therefore, in this scenario, they're always going to be exempt from second Korban Pesach because we want to avoid all possible problems. So you just say you don't have a first Pesach, and you don't have a second Pesach either. Exactly.